Our next session is back by popular demand. We hosted a concurrent session on flipped classrooms in 2011, and it was a humongous hit. So we brought back the 2 stars for another session in this plenary. We are excited to have John Bergmann, a former longtime science teacher and district technology leader, and Aaron Sams, Director of Digital Learning at the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, and also a former science teacher. Mr. Bergmann and Mr. Sams are considered the pioneers in the flipped classroom concept. They co-founded the Flipped Learning Network and co-authored the book, Flip Your Classroom, Reach Every Student in Every Class Every Day. Please join me in welcoming them back to the National Forum.
It's an honor to be back. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron, and we do want to encourage you to take out your devices and make sure that you are connected to the internet. We're going to get some information from you as we go through our presentation today. We'll throw the URL up there shortly, but make sure you are on. You can use a smartphone, you can use a tablet, you can use a laptop, whatever you happen to have. You can do that, and you can even text in your answer if you don't have a data plan. So what we want to talk to you today about is this idea of flipped classrooms. There's a lot of buzz around this word right now. There's a lot of people I think are doing it really, really well. Some people who I think are just kind of slapping a label on it and maybe not so great. And we want to give you some ideas on how you can ensure quality in flipped classrooms. Some of you are administrators and teachers, and you're involved deeply in the classroom practices. And we want to talk about kind of what that looks like in a classroom and just kind of the role that a teacher takes on in an increasingly interconnected world, digital learning world, and specifically within the context of a flipped classroom.
But before we sort of dive into the flipped classroom, we want to put a face on this. And so I want to introduce you all to Alyssa. So in her sophomore year in high school, Alyssa walked into my high school chemistry classroom, and she was a student who struggled with content. She was not a great student. And she showed up in her class, and Alyssa was not a kind of a student who loves school, but she took chemistry because she had to, and she showed up, and there was something about the flipped classroom that helped her to take on some independence that she needed for herself, and it really changed her world. And we're going to talk more about her later, but I want to make sure that we have a face for this so we understand this. Now, Aaron, talk us through this poll so they know how to do this.
Okay, so what we need you to do is, as soon as this loads, you need to go to pollev.com/Aaron Sams. That would be my name. And in there will just be an empty text box, and you can respond just typing in some words. And it'll create a little word cloud here for us. So the question is, what is the purpose of a school? You don't have to do complete sentences. You can just throw in words. You can type in multiple words. You can respond multiple times. I already put one word in there, so you can. I just wanted to make sure it worked this morning. But so just type in a couple of things, and we'll see if this is going to load for us. We should see things happening.
The purpose of school, just type it through your device, and it's all going to appear. It's magic.
And maybe it's not. That should be loading up. Oh, there it goes. Okay, good. So we've got some words coming in. So, educate and community learning, good stuff. Oh, educate, there's a big one. You guys know how these work. We'll give you about 20 more seconds, so get your speed thumbs out if you're doing this on your phone.
Learn, yeah. I love the word learn. So often we talk about I taught it, but they didn't learn it. I've heard that in schools. And of course, if that happens, the answer is they didn't learn it. Now what do we do? That's a better question.
Good. So we're seeing some great things here. So a place where education is happening, community, and this preparedness and success. And you know what's interesting here is we don't see like what we probably would have seen maybe 15, 20 years ago as the place you have to go to get the stuff, the information, these repositories of information, because information's cheap now.
I think a way to illustrate that is to think that the world has changed. So I'm getting older. I just turned 50, and I'm going to kind of go back to when I was in school. So I graduated from high school in 1982. So when I was in high school, if I wanted access to information, I would argue there were 3 places I could access it. Number 1, textbooks. Number 2, the libraries. And number 3, the heads of my teachers. But that is not the world our kids are growing up in, right? They can just do this. You know this, right? What is the population of Washington, D.C.?
The population of Washington, D.C. is about 646,400.
Do you guys remember how we used to have to access that information? Almanacs, encyclopedias, microfiche. Guys remember that? When I share that with audiences and there's somebody under 30, the word microfiche, they just, what?
Hey, John, what's microfiche?
Yeah, see? So the world has dramatically changed, hasn't it? We need to move, I believe, from this classroom, this picture probably taken 1950 vintage, where the teacher's standing up at the front of the room and they're disseminating information. But we've now had the privilege to go all over the world. And you know what classes look like? They look like that. We need to move from this classroom to these classrooms, to project-based classrooms, to where inquiry is valued, where classes where there are discussions, Socratic seminars. That's what we need to do in schools. We've got research that backs this up. But how do we get there? That's the problem, isn't it?
And that's been the challenge for us. So as teachers, we knew we wanted to make that transition. For, 19 years in your career, you were the dude that stand up in front and gave the chemistry information to the students. I did the same thing for the first half of my career, but I knew I wanted to make the transition. How do I make the class time less about me, more about the kids, less about the content that I need to give them, and more about the actual learning that takes place. So our stories that we're going to tell you today are based on our experiences in our classroom. So we're going to tell you about how we kind of moved through this transition, some key things that helped us make that transition, and then stories from other teachers who have adopted this type of model in their own, and how the learning has been focused more on their students and the class time focused more on learning itself.
So it turns out that the idea of the flipped classroom, just as some of its genesis, is that Aaron Sams and I, we taught in room 313 and room 314 at Woodland Park High School, a small rural school in the mountains of Colorado. And in the spring of 2006-2007 school year, we had this crazy idea. What if we stopped delivering direct instruction to our students? And we came up with this idea of the flipped classroom. But we say this not just to talk about its origins, but to tell you that this was built with real classrooms. We taught 6 classes a day. All right, 30 kids in a class. We did this because we were trying to meet the needs of our students. We had no idea that it would grow and that we'd have an opportunity, an honor to speak in front of you guys. And it's been this grassroots movement that's growing virally. We have a social network now with more than 20,000 teachers talking about the flipped classroom in groups from all over the world, from pre-K all the way up through college levels. And in fact, even in corporations, I was yesterday morning speaking to actually Procter & Gamble as they're working on flipping the training of some of their corporate training. So this has grown beyond what we'd have ever imagined. So Aaron, we are learners, aren't we? So why are we learners?
We're learners because we were, I was born into a family that wore bad sweaters, and so therefore I was born into a family of learners. My mom was a 5th grade teacher. My dad was an accountant by training, a coal miner by trade, because it was a career lifestyle choice. He liked to drive big trucks around instead of crunch numbers. But both of them were educated. They're from a long line of learners. My dad's mother was a teacher. She graduated from Teachers College at what is now the University of Northern Colorado in 1944. So learning is valued in my family, and anytime I went home as a student and I said, you know what, Mom, I'm stuck. I need to look at your teacher's manual. No, I need you to help me with my 5th grade math homework. Or Dad, can you help me with my science project? And they would say, yes, absolutely. I would love to, and I have the ability to do that because I've also grown up in a family that's valued learning.
You know, Aaron, I also have bad sweaters. So, but I also grew up in an amazing family. My father was the first person in his family to graduate from college. He got a degree in aeronautical engineering and then went and served the U.S. Air Force as a fighter pilot in Vietnam. In fact, as I was running this morning by the Vietnam Memorial, I think of him. And interesting enough, my father just a couple of years ago got another master's degree at age 75, just because, right? My mother was a teacher, but you know what? My grandmother, getting her honorary doctorate right there, she was a teacher. She graduated, my grandmother, in 1922 from college.
So why do we tell you this? Are we just here to brag about our educational heritage? No, we're not.
It's because, I'm going to say this, we grew up educationally privileged. But we also realize that not all kids have that same opportunity, do they? We believe that there's a problem with education, and that problem is that we have school backwards. We are doing something fundamentally backwards.
He's the backwards bowling champion
of the United
States. By the way, there is no such thing
as the National Backwards Bowling Champion, and that is him. I think it's pretty cool. So how many of you guys are parents yourself? You got your own kids or maybe grandkids, right? All right. Have you ever had this experience? Have you sat at the kitchen table like I have with my kids and they've been frustrated? They're trying to do their homework. You're trying to help them. And in each one of the cases, I've got 3 kids, 2 in college and 1 in high school. My kids, they've been in tears sometimes because here's the problem. We are sending our students home to do the hard stuff. Now, I know hard stuff is a really deep pedagogical term. Well, wait not. So let me talk about what I mean by hard stuff. So many of you are probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, you know? And if you have walked into my classroom for those first 19 years before we concocted the flipped classroom notion, and you thought of this as time, my classroom looked like this. Because I was standing up in front of my classroom teaching stuff to my kids. But from Bloom's taxonomics perspective, as we're aware, remembering and then understanding is more difficult cognitively, application is more difficult, analysis, evaluation, creating, you're getting more difficult cognitively. My class looked like that because in terms of time, because I spent most of my time doing what? Teaching them stuff. Newton's laws, balancing chemical reactions, the slope-intercept form. I taught them stuff. I taught them the easy stuff. I spent most of my time doing remembering, understanding. And what did I do? I then sent my kids home to do what? The hard stuff. And you know what? When that works? You know, it's worked for me as a kid growing up. Why did it work for me? Because I was the son of Harold and Marianne Bergmann. Why does it work for my own daughter, Emily? She is the daughter of an educator. In fact, she just came to me 3 weeks ago as she's preparing for her honors chemistry final at her high school. She said, Dad, I'm struggling with how to balance oxidation reduction reactions using the half reaction method. Can you help me? And I said, of course. But the problem is none of her friends have that same resource at home. So we propose that we flip Bloom's taxonomy. What we need to do is take the remembering and understanding activities, those lower-level cognitive tasks, and move those not always to the homework space, we'll talk about that also, but into the individual space so that the difficult cognitive tasks, the hard stuff, is done with the expert. Because who else could have helped Emily on those questions? Yeah, Aaron. Yeah. Her teacher. So if you flip the class, you are by definition doing the hard stuff with the experts. It's you guys who stood up just a minute ago, the teachers of the year. You are the experts. You're the ones who can help them with the hard stuff. Because so many kids go home and they do not have the resources. They did not grow up educationally privileged.
All right, so based on some conversations I had this morning, some of you have never actually heard of what the flipped classroom is, and that doesn't completely surprise us. We have some survey data that indicates that roughly somewhere between 10 and 15% of teachers are dabbling in it, so there's 85% of teachers that are not, and roughly somewhere between 28 and 40% of administrators are interested in the concept. So there's still quite a few people that are still just kind of catching on to what this is. So let me give you the brief 30-second summary. Direct instruction that used to be done in class is now being delivered sometimes at home, but we'll call it at home for now. What used to be given as homework is now being done in class. So it's really just a time shift. So the direct instruction is being delivered out of class. The work that was being done out of class is now being done in class. The hard stuff we're bringing back into class. Now there's benefits in just making that time shift. But let's be clear about something. If the lecture was here and now it's here, and the worksheet was here and now it's there, there's nothing revolutionary about lectures and worksheets. Okay? We're still, pedagogically, it's basically the same. But we're able to get the students the support that they need in class when they get stuck. So there is benefit. But what we want to talk about today is kind of where this has grown to, where it's exploded into, and what that second step is. So a lot of teachers start here. We call this Flip Class 101, kind of the entry point. But we don't want anyone to stop here. Right. If someone says, you know what, flip my class, good to go, going to ride this thing to retirement, they're doing it wrong, okay? This is a place to get into leveraging some digital resources to get the attention away from the teacher and back on the students, back on the learner. Moving from a teacher-centered learning environment to a student-centered learning environment.
So it turns out that we really need to ask one key question. This was actually illustrated for us at a conference. We were speaking in Canada, and this teacher says, I'm in. I want to flip my class. And then she asked us this question, but what will I do in class? Don't you see what she's asking? All I've ever done is lecture. Now, what do I do in class? I said, well, you ought to probably figure the answer to that question out. You see, this is the key question. What's the best use of that in-class, face-to-face time? You see, the flipped classroom is not about these videos that you send home. It's about what you do in class with your kids, the hard stuff. That's what you need to figure out. And so for us as science teachers, we wanted our kids to get help with the hard stuff and actually wanted to do more experiments. In our classes, we did 50% more experiments than we did the year before. Our kids scored 1 standard deviation better on all of our tests. It was a crazy, amazing thing that we saw happen. And we've seen these types of results repeated again and again. But let me tell you, different teachers have answered this question differently. So I spoke at a group at a school. 3 teachers afterwards said, we're in. We want to flip our class. I said, great. So what do you guys do? They said, we're the PE department. Mm-hmm. I said, really? It's pretty cool. What are you thinking? John, when you asked us this question, we answered, we want our students to move their bodies. The Admiral just talked a little bit about, obesity and physical fitness, and the teachers then said this, we spend far too much time telling our students how to move their bodies instead of them actually moving their bodies. We've seen this work in, this model working in woodworking classes, elementary classes, English, math, science, history. It makes no difference. It works.
All right, so we're going to do another poll here. So if you just go back to that same URL, pollev.com/Aaron Sams, it'll put a new question up there. What is the role of a teacher? So while you're responding to this question, what's interesting is a lot of teachers are kind of interested in leveraging video, teacher-created video, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But as John alluded to, this teacher in Canada, she said, what am I going to do with my class time? I have to completely reinvent that. And this is a question that a lot of teachers have to wrestle through, where they're uncomfortable with this transition. I have been the keeper of the content, and I have doled it out in tiny little bits for my entire career. If that's not my primary function, what am I going to do now? Yeah. And by no means do we think teachers should be replaced with digital content, because they can't be. Teachers are absolutely essential to help kids get their heads around stuff, and they have to be content area experts. They have to be learning experts, and the value of teachers, I think, is increased and enhanced in a situation where we have access to so much information and so many resources. It's completely indispensable.
I love what they're saying, Aaron, is that it's really more about facilitation. You see, in the flipped classroom, the teacher is no longer the disseminator of content. They're a facilitator of learning. It changes the role of teachers.
And we've known this. 20 years ago, the article came out that said we need to be a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. But me and John and other teachers were like, I know I want to do that, but how do I make the transition? By no means do we think we have the answer to education, but this is a tool that's really resonating with teachers, that's allowing them to take those little steps to make that transition.
So we want to now focus on sort of 3 areas. We're going to talk about content first. We'll tell you what the other areas are later. Is that content really does make a difference, doesn't it? Aaron and I both sat on the state of Colorado. I helped rewrite the state of Colorado standards, and Aaron was the chairman of the science committee for the state of Colorado prior to Common Core. And so we really believe content really matters. Okay? And I think a way to think about content is to look at, this is Webb's Depth of Knowledge. Dr. Webb from the University of Wisconsin developed this. In many ways, it's like Bloom's taxonomy, but I think a bit more comprehensive. And so if you look at the levels, it's hard to read probably, but level 1 he calls recall, and he's got words such as list, label, recognize. So that's kind of the basic cognition. Level 2, graph, classify, interpret, distinguish, use context clues. Level 3 is strategic thinking, use concepts to solve unique or non-routine problems, assess, revise. And level 4 is extended thinking, analysis, synthesize, create, etc. And as I helped write those standards in Colorado, and I've had a chance to talk to lots of teachers all over the country, if you look at these sort of old state standards that we had prior to Common Core, most of those, if you were to classify them using this particular framework, were level 1 and level 2. And if you look at the Common Core state standards and the Virginia standards and the Texas standards, if you look at them, they are typically, if you would classify them, I would say 3 and some 4s. But so we have a problem, don't we? It's because we have moved to these new standards, and we've got a lot of teachers who've learned how to teach level 1 and level 2, and we're expecting them now to teach level 3 and level 4. And we've got a lot of students who are going home and not getting the help that they need. And so don't you see how the flipped classroom is going to leverage this? It's going to allow the kids to do the hard stuff with the expert in the room, and how the flipped classroom is really one of the answers for the new standards, Common Core, and the other standards that are being rolled out across the country.
So the idea then is we can take teacher-created content, and they can produce these very short, brief videos to deliver the stuff in a very targeted way to their students to cover that kind of level 1, level 2 stuff, the basic remembering and understanding material as you saw in Bloom's taxonomy.
Now, Aaron, tell me about who should create this content. So the students are going to watch these videos at home, but I know there's lots and lots of great videos on the internet.
Yeah.
There's lots of people making videos. We have videos. We have 2 million hits on our videos. But should they watch our videos in class instead of, well, talk to me about it?
They probably shouldn't watch ours. So we think this question is one of the essential questions that all teachers are going to have to ask if they want to go down this road. Do I need to make my own stuff, or can I use the other stuff that's out there on the internet? Should I make my own video, or should I use somebody else's? Hands down, the feedback we keep getting from parents, from teachers, and from students all over the world has been, we want the teacher to create the content for the students. We do not want them to use somebody else's material. And here's why.
So let's listen to a teacher tell us why he believes that he should create the content. So I'll let Adam speak for himself.
So I'm Adam Johnson from Alabama. I teach 8th grade math. And for 2 years, I flipped using other people's videos. And I met John at a conference, and he challenged me to make my own videos and really pushed me. And against my will, I started making my own. Using other people's videos, I had 40 to 60% active participation. After making my own, it shot to 100% active participation. And it extends the level of trust. It gives a personal touch. And that's why I think making my own content is the difference maker. I think that's the game changer in the flipped method.
And there's lots of reasons we believe that this makes a difference. Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that you know your kids. Teachers know their kids, and having some sort of random person from the internet, and some people, even well-thought-of people, to teach that, we need to make sure that it's about that connection that they have with their kids. That's what makes a difference. So, Aaron, I want to tell another story.
Yep.
So I met Randy Brown. This is Randy Brown. He's a third-grade teacher in this Seattle area. Just like 3 weeks ago, I bumped into him at a conference. And he said, Randy said, I just got to tell you a story, John. I said, okay. He says, I was on a plane 2 years ago reading your book. So he got a copy of our book, and he said, this is what I've always wanted. I finally get it. He went back to his classroom, and he started creating short videos for his third graders. And we just talked about the panel about the third grade, how important third grade is, right? He says, what I've always wanted is a second person in my room, another adult who can help kids. So what he does, the kids actually don't take the videos home. They watch them in the class. He has a 40-inch TV. That's relatively inexpensive he got. And the kids watch half the kids. He's got 26 kids. So 13 kids are watching video about the content. And what is he doing with the other 13? Working in small groups and one-on-one. And then they rotate. There's this complex rotational system, which I never quite figured out. Those of you from Washington State, you've got to go visit Randy's class. It's just, I mean, I want to see this, personally. And I'll tell you, though, what he told me. He says, before I did this, my students would score, in terms of the reading and math scores, they would score about 1.1 increase in grade level. This is for the first many years of his career. The last 2 years, he says, I'm at 1.7 and 1.8. I said, wow. He says, I said, why? Why, Randy? He says, more one-on-one time, helping the kids with stuff. The hard stuff, if you will, right?
Yeah, so content is important. We want our students to learn to read, to do math. 3x = 6 has an answer, and they need to know how to figure that out. They might figure that out differently, because we all kind of learn and understand things differently, but content is very important. So there's a lot of conversation in education that everything needs to be interest-driven. It all needs to be, relationally related, but content is important, and we never want to pull all the way back from that. So this is a way for teachers to create content that's aligned to standards, that they have control over the quality of, and build up a library that they can then access when the students need it.
So does it work? Does this method work? Is there research? And the answer is yes. If you go to our nonprofit organization's website, flippedlearning.org/research, we just had another literature review published just last week. George Mason University assisted on this, and you can read about the research, and there's a bunch of case studies. In fact, one of the case studies was made into a short video, and a caveat, a technology company made this video, so they're going to have a little plug at the end. But the results, though, are not because of the technology. It's because of what the classroom did. So this is a school outside of Detroit. So let's listen to the principal, Greg Green, tell us this story.
How can you let 52% of your students, 1 in every 2 students, failing your English, math, and science class, and even 28% is too high for social studies. My name is Greg Green, and I am Clintondale High School principal and curriculum coordinator for grades 6 through 12. When we evaluated our failure rate last year from our freshmen, we found that in English language arts, our freshmen were failing at a 52% rate. And in mathematics, they were failing at a 44% rate, science at a 41% rate, and then social studies at 28% rate. And as a principal, it's just unconscionable to have that going on in your building.
To continue doing the same thing and think you're going to get a different result isn't going to work. So we sat down and we said we got to try something different.
Because we felt like the class time, was probably the most crucial time that we had with students.
We decided to flip it and try spending more time working with the students in class and having them get the lecture and the lessons at home.
This allows us to get more one-on-one time with them. I'm not speaking to a mass group.
By having homework done within class, we quadrupled the time that students and the teachers actually work together in, going over and learning the information.
My name is Mike Weinreich. I came here when I was in 8th grade. Coming from Detroit Public Schools, it's real different.
Why'd you come from Detroit?
Yeah, last year Mike Kwan was a freshman in the class, and he was struggling, and he'd have a problem, and say problem number 1 was difficult for him. He couldn't do it at home, so he would give up. So all of his homework was empty, was blank.
Well, now I'm sitting there. I can see his frustration. I can go help him. I can get him past number 1. Now he can do 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got trouble with problem number 6 again. I can help him.
But the biggest surprise is the results. When we did go to the flip model, we had no failures. No one failed. There's a kid now, unfortunately, he doesn't go here anymore because he just was that far behind. He had to go to an alternative high school. But it was the only class he passed here in the high school.
By reversing the instructional model, what we did is we actually seen a dramatic reduction in the percentage of students who are failing. And in ELA, the percentages went from 52% to 19%. In math, we went from 44% to 13%. And in science, we went from 41% to 19%. And in social studies, we went from 28 to actually under 10%. And so what we've seen is a huge reduction in failure by reversing the instructional model, which doesn't cost any money. My name is Greg Green. I'm a principal. I'm a husband. I'm a father. And I'm using Camtasia Relay to flip my high school.
And folks, that video is 3 years old. And where that school is today is even better than it's at. His ACT test scores, it was a school that had not met AYP and now has. A lot of amazing things happening there. Their website is flippedhighschool.com, actually, if you want to know. So, Aaron, take us through the second. So we said content.
Yeah,
and
so
now
we've talked
curiosity.
about content, but one of the missing components of a lot of schools, because we are so focused on content, we're concerned about standards, test scores, and whatnot, and we don't want to back away from that. But the flipped instructional model helps us maintain control of content so we can develop this idea of curiosity with students. Now, curiosity is great because I want students to want to learn. When a student asks me, why should I need to learn this, I need to have an answer, and I need them to want to go find an answer for why they should be learning algebra. And they should be learning algebra within a context of something that interests them. So what we're noticing, and this is kind of that second iteration, that second permutation of flipped classroom. Teachers get in, they go, okay, I'm going to flip my class. So they make videos. Everybody watches the same video Wednesday night. They come to class. Everybody does the same thing on Thursday. And after a year of that, they say, okay, I've got a repository of content. Where can I take this? And the where that they can take this, it takes on all sorts of different forms. And we call this flipped learning, which is the title of our second book, which is all stories of teachers of how they've taken this flipped classroom model and
so for
developed
1 year,
it.
we find that teachers move from they stay at flipped class 101. I know we just put the traditional flipped class. I know I just said those two words in the same sentence. Flipped class 101. And then we moved to a flipped mastery model where our students had to master the content before they could move on. So we just merged flipped with mastery learning, which has been around for a long time. But we found also other teachers who moved and did different things besides flipped mastery. They added peer instruction. We've got a great case study out of Minnesota where the teacher teacher flipped his class, and his scores rose, and then he would flip class plus peer instruction, and he had crazy dramatic results. And then we added project-based learning, Genius Hour. I don't have time to talk about each of these, but this is anything to the right of the Flipped Class 101 we want to call flipped learning. It is the second step, if you will. The topic of this session is quality in flipped classrooms. We see quality happening when teachers really transition from the flipped class, though that is good, to flipped learning, and that's where the magic happens. In fact, our books, look at our books. Flipped Class, Flipped Learning. There's a progression that's happening. It's version 1, if you will, and version 2 to help educators move beyond this. And we see this as a stepping stone. You see that first year that we flipped our class in 2007 is we did Flipped Class 101. We didn't know what we were doing. The second year, notice it took us a year, we moved to Flipped Mastery. And we made a lot of mistakes. And we almost gave up. And then the next year we did Flipped Mastery again, and we really honed it down. But then we actually started adding project-based and inquiry. And each of these steps I just took was a year. And we're seeing a lot of teachers make that same transition. They need to do one step at a time. And sometimes it takes multiple years for this to happen. Change takes time, and we understand that. So let's introduce Steve.
Do you have time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me introduce Steve. Steve Kelly, speaking to the Michigan School Board, and a math teacher who has made this transition. So let's see what Steve has to say. I think I clicked it again. There's a little second here. Yeah.
I got in the car. I'm driving home from Lansing. I got a nice hour drive to think, and I got more excited and more excited and more excited to the point I finally realized I need to change. I'm a very good teacher if it was 1997. I mean, and that was how I did my national board stuff. It was all the stuff I did in 1997. And so I started, how does an old guy get better? And I heard that around this table all day long, or all morning long. How does an old person get better? So I started reading. In reading, I kept making this list of all these things that needed to be done in education. You folks mentioned almost all of them this morning. What needs to happen with this next generation? And so I wrote them all down, and then I freaked out. How on earth do we do it? Within the bell schedule and calendar schedule we have right now, I thought it was impossible. And so, yeah, I did jump on a bandwagon or a fad, if you will, with the flipped classroom. And that was my way. I finally learned, I begged for $400 for gas from my school district, and I road tripped it to Colorado to meet these guys that made this thing, and I met some other teachers from around the world that are learning how to flip. And I got excited because the first thing they said was, it's not about the videos. It's about the quality instruction you give in the classroom on top of the videos. So my videos are 1997. Yeah, they look great. You can see me on camera, and I'm wild and crazy, just like I always have been. But the in-class time is invaluable. The in-class stuff is working so well. I now have time to do the 21st century things, higher level thinking skills, have students create things. You know, everything I've read has said this is the creative generation. My kids are now creating things. Is it working? Yeah. I look back at my data 2 years ago and a year before that. We had an appalling 63% in my class. Horrible. It really bothered me. When I left yesterday, we were 82. So that's huge. And I know it's not a MEP score or an MME score, but it's my score. And it allowed me to do some things with a lot of mastery, a lot of one-on-one teaching, a lot of differentiation. I have a lot to learn about that yet. But anyway, an old guy can change. And I really think that change happens when we want to change. Imposed change doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. If I want to change, I'm going to drive 2,000 miles, and I'm going to get better, and I'm going to be a better teacher.
So what do teachers have, Aaron? So
yeah.
as we're talking about some of these things.
So, you know, John and I host a conference every year around the flipped classroom model, and we actually polled them. We wanted to find out. So we had 600 people. We said, if you had 5 minutes with some people who can make a difference in terms of educational policy, what would you want them to know? And there were a few things that they told us. And one is they wanted to say thank you for getting schools connected and interconnected and doing the best that we can to get everybody up and running and online. Because there are 7 billion people in this world, 3 billion of which are connected to the internet. There's no reason that kids should only have to learn from their one teacher and the other 30 kids in their class. Let's let them learn from all 3 billion people that are out there and let them get connected. So they said, thank you for making that happen. And I've witnessed this happen. I mean, I saw the internet kind of come online when I was in high school, and then it was there through college, and now as a teacher. I've never taught without an LCD projector in my room. So just having those kind of resources is just invaluable, and letting us experiment with those things to change the way teaching practice has to look now that the world is more interconnected.
And I want to talk about what they need. as we asked these teachers, they said, number one, we love the infrastructure that's happening, but we need more. It's not, most schools now have connections to the internet, but it's not the same as having, more bandwidth. And I know that many of you are starting to work on those programs, and that's such a big need. And then the other thing they said is that it's all about professional development. Because, frankly, you can do this wrong. You can do the flipped classroom wrong. So I'll tell you a story. I met a teacher at our conference. He said, I'm going to come to your conference. And I sat at the bus, and we're having a conversation. And he said, John, let me tell you what I've been doing. And the thing was, he jumped right into flipped classroom and flipped mastery because he'd heard the term flipped classroom and flipped mastery. And he was doing it very poorly. And because he just said, I'll make some videos, and my kids will watch these videos, and then it'll all work. And as I was querying him, I realized that he had not read a book. He had not researched anything. He just went out and did it. And I said, dude, all the problems that you're having are chronicled, say, in our book or online. It doesn't matter where you get the information, but you've got to get some resources. There is a huge need for professional development on this. I was doing some research on cooperative learning. Cooperative learning started in the 1930s. All right? And teachers, you probably know this. Some people say, I'm doing cooperative learning because they put kids in groups, and they call it cooperative learning. So anybody can butcher and ruin a model. And so we're seeing a lot of this happen. I was with a school board member recently in a state, and she was not a big fan of the flipped classroom. And it was because some of the teachers said, hey, we're going to try this thing out, and let's go. And they had not done enough research, enough professional development. So it's very important that you get quality professional development around this notion. So,
and one other thing, one of the common themes that the teachers give us their feedback was actually two main common themes. One was, come visit my classroom.
Yeah.
Come see what's going on a day-to-day basis. Spend some time with us, with the kids. Because a lot of teachers feel isolated. I mean, it's a very isolating profession. You can go into your room, you close the door, and that's it. It's you and your kids, and that's it. They are more than happy to share that and say, come see some of the stuff that we're doing. And the final thing is time. We're not going to lie. If you want to go out and make a bunch of video content, that takes a lot of work. Just like developing your own curriculum, creating your own tests, whatever. I don't know of a single teacher who teaches cover to cover through the adopted textbook material. I've never met one. Even if they're supposed to, they still don't. Just so you know, if you think, go visit their classroom. Maybe you don't visit those classrooms. But nobody goes cover to cover. They always continue to develop their own stuff. It's an iterative process. They always try to improve. At the end of the year, you go, yeah, that worked, and boy, I'm never doing that again. And you have to get better. But to get better, they need not just professional development, but time to actually do that. So we're in a world where teachers are getting they're getting beat up. And they need some time to just kind of go, and to reflect. So that's the feedback we got. We just wanted to share that with you for what it's worth.
And I want to encourage you also to reach out to us if you want. And all across this country, practically every single school district in America, there are people doing this. And I would encourage you to reach out to us, and we can connect you with teachers who have flipped their class. And I would encourage you to go visit these classrooms. I really think that's a very powerful thing. And I know there's questions you probably have. We have a session afterwards for questions. But let me just tell you what the two big questions were always asked. Just as we sat down to table.
We're going to read your mind. Hang on a second.
I'm going to read your mind. The number one question asked, what about kids who don't have access to technology? All right. We did this in a school with 25% of the kids with no internet at home. That's in 2007. It can be done. Long story short, kids had DVD players. We burned the videos on DVD kids for the kids who didn't have access. You can make this work. We've worked with schools with 95% free and reduced lunch who've flipped their classes. You can make this work. It's working, not just can. Second question is, what if they don't do the homework? There's lots of strategies to that, and we can talk about them. What if they don't watch the videos? We know how to fix that. But let me also say that you will never completely solve the homework problem. Kids will sometimes not do homework. I know that's a shock to you. But there's strategies. It's the most talked about subject on our network of 20,000
And you can do this
teachers.
without assigning homework if you don't think
Right.
homework should ever be done anyhow.
See, but the key is that we need to rethink school. We need to change the role of teachers from the sage on the stage truly to the guide on the side. We need for our teachers to do the hard stuff with our students because that's the stuff they need the help on. All right, those videos are just lower level things. Some people have asked us, well, this is great. We could hire less teachers because we can learn via video. No. You see, the value of the teacher is in the top of Bloom's taxonomy. That's where we need those teachers in these small groups working, like our friend Randy Brown we talked about a minute ago. We need that. It's not going to help the funding problem, but it's going to help the education problem. The teachers who are doing this, they say, John, this is harder than the way I used to teach, but it's better. So they're going to work harder, but they're going to be more satisfied. And there's a third thing that we haven't talked about, Aaron, and that's relationships. So the third thing that we want to say, so the first thing was content. The second thing was curiosity. But one of the most important elements about good teaching, and I know you teachers of the year know this, is it's about the connections you can make with students. Because we are social beings, aren't we? And our kids are, and they need connections. A lot of kids come to school, and they don't have sort of a parent figure. We had just a very moving presentation by a 5th grade teacher who flipped her class and how she became a surrogate parent to a particular student. It's very moving as she told this story. And in fact, I think we want to tell a little bit of that kind of a story. So Aaron, let's bring Alyssa back into the picture.
All right, so I'm going to tell you more about Alyssa. And the thing about relationships is it's just something you can't automate. And it's something it's very difficult to measure. Kind of like curiosity, difficult to automate. We can automate and measure content, but the other two components, which are essential parts of learning, you can't. And so let me tell you about Alyssa. So as John mentioned, she was a struggling student. She was extremely bright, but she just refused to play the game of school. She said, I will not jump through hoops to earn points, because that's not the same thing as learning something. She said, I like video games and I like science, but I hate science class because it's just about ticking the boxes to get points to get a letter grade. She says, I'm done with that. So she kind of got interested in chemistry when she was in John's chemistry class. So she said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to take AP chemistry, advanced placement chemistry. And she took my advanced placement chemistry class, which was in a flip model, and got into chemistry, and she got a 1 on the AP chemistry exam.
Now, just if you're not familiar, this AP test, you have a 1 to a 5. She got the worst score possible.
Yeah. So I was kind of disappointed. I thought she would do better than that. But I said, you know what? These things happen, whatever. I didn't think much about it. But then she said, Mr. James, can I do an independent study with you?
So that was her junior year. She's her sophomore year, chemistry with me. AP chemistry the second year with you.
Senior year, she said,
she learned, but she struggled with the content. She started behind in many ways, too. That was part of the issue. Yep. She was behind.
So she wanted to do a project. She said, you know what, Mr. James, I want to charge my cell phone with energy from the sun at night. I said, Alyssa, the sun, not night. You say, yeah, I get it. I'm going to store it as chemical energy, and then I want to turn that into electrical energy again. I say, oh, okay, well, that's pretty cool. So in my head, I'm kind of thinking, okay, she needs to know about galvanic cells, photovoltaic cells, balancing chemical equations, decomposition. I could have given her a list of stuff and say, go learn, but I said, okay, go. So she did, and she went. She came back a few days later and said, Mr. Sams, I need a solar panel. I said, yep, yes you do. She said, how do I get one? I said, well, how much do they cost? She said, about $15. I said, well, it just so happens that I need to take my wife out on a date, and my 3 children need to be babysat. So why don't you come babysit my children, and I will buy you a solar panel. She said, okay. So she did. So a little while later, Mr. Sams, I'm able to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Why do I keep getting twice as much hydrogen as I do oxygen? I'm like, did you not learn anything in my chemistry class? Okay. I have a 3-minute video on balancing chemical equations. Go. Boom. So just-in-time instruction. I took the resource that I had, and I gave it to her when she needed it, and she was able to move on. So she comes back later. Mr. Sams, I need some parts because I need to build this fuel cell that will take the hydrogen and oxygen and run it back through to be able to generate electrical charge again. I need $75. I'm like, $75? That sounds like February, March, and April date night for me with my wife, and you can come watch the kids again. So she did, and I bought her the stuff that she needed. And so over the process of this, she got to know my family, and she got the stuff that she needed, and my whole family kind of just developed a really great relationship with her. Interesting thing is, she went on to study chemical engineering. So this kid who struggled with school, who got a 1 on the AP chemistry exam, successfully built something on her own that will take energy from the sun to charge a cell phone, nice little prototype that she built. She got excited about this stuff.
So now she is at the Colorado School of Mines.
She'll be graduating next year with a degree in chemical engineering. Yeah, I know, it's awesome. So the cool thing about Alyssa is she did an internship at a coal mine in Gillette, Wyoming, where my parents live. And my parents said, oh, one of your students is coming. Well, we need to feed her because that's what my mother does, is she loves people with food. And so they invited Alyssa over. So now my children know her, I know her, I taught her, she knows my parents. She's like almost a part of my family, right? Here's the crazy thing. For the first half of my career, I did this: content delivery, practice problems, let's get you ready to test prep stuff, right? Yep. I didn't know any of my students. I couldn't tell you anything. Well, I could tell you some things, but I knew most of my students, and this is not an isolated incident. I knew my students better in the first week of school in this particular model because I was talking to every single one of them every single day, not worrying so much about content delivery, and giving them some choice and some autonomy and some flexibility in what they wanted to learn and how they wanted to learn it, but still maintaining control of that content. So this could just completely revolutionize my world.
And so we think it really comes down to, actually, we've had those three circles: content, curiosity, and relationship. And we think a better picture is this, is that we need to have an intersection between content, curiosity, and relationship. We believe in content, all right? There's stuff kids need to learn. Kids don't know what they don't know, and we do, right? Teachers, right? So we've got to teach them stuff. Curiosity, we want them to foster the things, to ask the questions like solar panels at night. That's pretty cool. How do you charge the cell phone at night? That's the curiosity piece. But we must not forget it's about that personal connection between the three: content, curiosity, and relationship. Thank you very much.